Hi everyone and welcome to this video. Magali here, and today I will be going through some hacks and helpful tips and cues to help enhance your yoga practice at home and avoid some common mistakes. So my first thing, and something that I always incorporate into my own yoga classes, is time to arrive. So if you have the time, feel free to take 5 whole minutes in Shavasana or Child's Pose, whatever it is that's comfortable for you. Or otherwise, even just 5 deep conscious breaths. Really giving yourself the time to arrive in your body, acknowledge how you're feeling before you start to move and flow in your yoga practice. Too often we rush to a yoga class or even a meditation class, and before we've given ourselves the time to arrive, the class is starting and we're still in this kind of chaotic headspace. So this arrival time of just closing off the eyes for a few conscious breaths is really, really helpful to bring you into that space of calm and deep awareness of the body, the mind, and where you're at today. The next thing that I want to focus on is props. I find a lot of the time we're so resistant to using props in our practice, as if it means that we're not going as far as we can. But actually props can really help enhance the posture that we're in. So I will be showing you some examples throughout this video on how props can help certain postures. But the first one I want to focus on is forward folds. So in a seated forward fold, the focus is very often on the hamstrings, and quite rightly, because it's the part of the body that we are stretching. However, we are also working the hip flexors. And if you find yourself when you're seated and your legs are long out in front of you and your back is curving as if you're struggling to sit upright, I do recommend that you use a pillow or a flat block or even a blanket folded a few times. Sitting on a prop will help elevate the spine and give a little bit more space for the hip flexors. And here, instead of trying to go as far down as possible, leading with the forehead, because it's a forward fold, we think that we have to fold forwards, although this isn't wrong again. What we really want to focus on is that spine alignment. So we send the tailbone backwards as we reach the heart forwards. And seeing as it's the hamstrings that we are wanting to access, what's good is to also push the heels forward as the toes come up towards the face. So the legs are really active in this posture. And remember that the neck is just as much a part of the spine. And when we drop the head, there's the tendency to reach that forehead down, and this can compromise the alignment of the spine. So lifting the crown of the head up slightly can really help lead the heart forward. And you may not go as far as you're used to, and that's absolutely fine, because the alignment is really what's important here. And the more you practice with the correct alignment, the more the parts of the body that are working in this posture will become more used to the movement that you're doing. Now, downward facing dog. Most yoga classes and flows at some point will have a downward dog in it. And this posture, although used very often, is actually quite complex and challenging. And I want to bring your awareness to some cues and alignment points to focus on in your downward dog. So firstly, the hands. Now this isn't just important in downward facing dog, but in any other posture where you're weight bearing on the hands. What you really need to do is spread the fingers as wide as possible and ground the knuckles of the hands so that we're not putting too much pressure on the wrist. We're really spreading the weight evenly throughout the hand. So in your downward facing dog, really spreading the fingers as much as possible and really pushing into the earth so that you can send that tailbone to the sky and find a beautiful long line in the spine. When we kind of become a little bit saggy and complacent, we get an arching in the back and it's just limbs flying everywhere. If we really ground the hands and push the earth away, we can find a beautiful alignment in our downward dog. Another point here is the shoulders. So I'm sure often you will have heard shoulders away from the ears. And although this cue isn't wrong, it can be damaging because yoga is a push action. And so inevitably the shoulders will come a little bit closer to the ears. But then if you hear the cue shoulders away from the ears, you bring the shoulders down, but then you're counteracting this push action that we want in postures like downward facing dog. What that really means is that you need to bring your awareness to your scapula and wrapping that around your rib cage, so that instead of sending the elbows out to the sides, we squeeze the elbows together, wrapping that scapula around the rib cage, and automatically the shoulders will become a little bit further away from the ears, but with a rotation rather than with a pull back action. So for example, in your downward facing dog, if I'm here and I say shoulders away from the ears, I squeeze them back, but this is not supporting my neck, it's not supporting my back, it's not supporting my shoulders. If I come back to downward facing dog here, my elbows are out to the sides, but if I squeeze the elbows together, my shoulders automatically go further away from the ears. So this is a really important cue and tip in your downward dog, that don't release the shoulders away. Simply wrap the arm, wrap that side of the shoulder around the rib cage to create space in between the ear and the shoulder. Another thing in downward facing dog is that you absolutely can have a little micro bend or even a very big bend in the knees when you are in this posture. So if we find downward facing dog, if our hamstrings are tight, what will happen is that if we try to lengthen the legs, our back body will compensate for that. It will try and create space in the hip area by curving the back. If we micro bend or give our knees a really big bend, we can then find more space in the spine, melting the heart a little bit closer to the earth as we push the hands, like we just spoke about, into the mat and find a beautiful long line in the spine, because that's the alignment that's important, rather than keeping the legs straight and finding a curve in the back, because here there's absolutely no engagement. Bend the knees, melt the heart, push into the earth with the hands, wrap the scapula around the rib cage. And breathe here. Speaking of micro bends, so hyperextensions in the elbows is extremely popular, and what that is when the inner crease of the elbow faces forward, as you can see here. So what I invite you to do, if you know that you have this or you've just found out that you have this, you can always keep a little micro bend in the elbow, and it might not even feel like a little bend, but it just means that we're activating and engaging the muscles rather than relying on the skeletal structure of our body. With a little micro bend, we bring the outside of the elbow to the sides, the inside of the elbow facing the midline. And here we're really using the muscles and the engagement of those muscles to help us hold in each posture. And same goes for downward facing dog. As I explained earlier, we don't send the inner creases forward, as the case may be and may happen if you have this hyperextension. We keep a little micro bend in the elbow so that our arms are engaged and active. So this can feel a little bit contradictory because, as I said, we're trying to, in our downward facing dog, we're trying to squeeze the rib cage together. So we're bringing this arm like this. So you need to find a happy midline point between wrapping that scapula around the rib cage and at the same time engaging the forearm to face the midline, to engage it, to turn and rotate towards the midline. So the upper arm and the shoulder and scapula are wrapping around here, and this forearm is wrapping around the other way. Next, swinging the leg from three-legged dog to your lunge pose, so with the foot in between the hands. What I would like you to imagine is that you're trying to step the foot over something. So again, we have this push action. We really want to push the earth away with the hands. We lift the leg, and instead of simply waving forward, instead of thinking forward, let's think up. So we can lift the back heel, lift the bum as much as possible. And then as we shift forward, we also want to think up. So we keep pushing, 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 squeezing the knee into the chest. And instead of just thinking forward, imagine that you're trying to step over something and place the foot in between the hands. So again, going back to using props in our practice, what we can do is use blocks to help in drills to help with this movement. So if we grab two blocks, place them exactly where your hands would be, And then from your downward facing dog, so we lift the leg up to three-legged dog and push, 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 push. Imagine that you're stepping over something. And here, the height of the blocks will help in practicing to step the foot in between the hands without simply dragging the knee forward. An important thing to remember is that body proportions play a big factor in yoga and certain postures. So it is possible that if we have quite long legs and our arms are shorter in proportion to our legs, that actually this action will be more difficult for some people. So don't get disheartened. Use your blocks, your props, to help you practice these movements. So we lift the leg, we push, push, push up. Bring the knee towards the chest, squeeze, 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 and think up rather than forward and down. Keep pushing, and as gently as possible, place the foot in between the hands. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of yoga is a push action. And although I've spoken a lot about pushing with the hands, we can do the same with the feet to really help engage the body and all of the muscles to get ourselves into postures rather than relying on the skeletal structure, so the back body in the examples that I will be showing you. The first example that I will be showing you is coming into your lunge pose. So if we go through the transition that we've just been working with, we find our downward facing dog. We lift one leg up towards the sky. Think up, 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 up. Squeeze the knee towards the chest. Walk over this hurdle, step over the hurdle, and bring the foot in between the hands. From here, quite often, we simply rely on our back, the spine, to bring us up. What I'd like you to imagine, just had a little wobble there, is that you're really using the earth as an item to push against, as an energy to push, a force. So from here, instead of just lifting the back body, push the front foot into the earth as you inhale, rise the body up to your lunge. The next example with this push motion from the feet and using that energy and that force of the earth is when you come up to halfway lift or all the way up to standing from your forward fold. So if we come to our standing forward fold, hinging from the hips here, instead of just allowing the back body and the spine to take the weight of the body to come up or just halfway, if we really push the feet into the earth and as we inhale, push, come halfway, use the core, squeeze the navel towards the spine, shoulders back, and we come up with a flat back, really pushing the feet into the earth, squeezing the legs together even though they're not touching, and using that energy from the earth to help us stay here. And then we can exhale, release. And the same goes if we come all the way to standing. So we really push the feet into the earth, and as we inhale, feel that pull bring us all the way up to standing without straining the back body and the spine to help us come up. The last little tip and hack that I have for you is for headstand. So in this inversion, it's quite possible that often the limbs are sort of flying everywhere. The body's not used to being upside down, and it sends the mind into a sort of panic mode. And what's really helpful is to use a prop and place this prop, so it can be a block or a tennis ball is quite good sometimes as well. Place whatever prop you have in between your legs when you are in handstand pose, and this helps center the energy so that your limbs aren't just flailing about. It helps center the energy, squeezing all of the muscles together to really find a strong and stable headstand. If you have a partner or friend at home that's available to help you in your practice, you can also ask them to place their fist in between your thighs. This option is probably a little bit better for beginners because when you are by yourself and placing the prop, you do have to get up there with the prop in between your legs, because obviously your arms and hands will be otherwise occupied holding you in your headstand. So you would have to place the prop in between your thighs first. Create your foundation, so shoulders over the wrists, and then you bring the elbows underneath the shoulders. Make sure that the hands can touch, and then interlace the fingers ahead. Place the crown of the head down on the mat, and the backs of the hands help support the weight of the head. Tuck the toes under behind you, push into the feet, lift the bum, walk the feet as close to the head as possible, and then bend one knee, bend the other. And then from here, squeeze the legs together
and lift the toes towards the sky. The block or whatever prop you're using, as you can see, really helps centers the energy. It's difficult to talk while you're in this posture, so I advise not doing it. And then lowering down as gently as possible. If you do have a partner, obviously you can make your way up there in your own time, even perhaps using a wall at home, and then the person can place their fist in between your thighs, really helping you center all of that energy. So you're not just a flapping human. That's it from me today. I hope these hacks and tips and cues and stuff were helpful to you and you can implement them into your practice. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me them in the comments below. If you have any particular postures or anything that you're working with and you'd like some help, please don't hesitate to send them over to me as well. Perhaps I can create a video. I'm sure a lot of people have the same issues. Often we feel like we're the only ones, but remember, we are all in this together. Okay, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and I will see you on Friday for a lovely flow. Bye!